excited to talk to you all about MBA applications. So as you can see, statistics from last year were just insane. And we're imagining they might be the same this year coming up. So with over 51,000 people submitting applications, or 51,000 applications submitted. So, right, people can submit to other schools. Only 10,577 actually made it. So 23% of those applications got admitted. So this is why we're here today. We're going to be talking about all the advantages and hacks you can have as far as the MBA application goes. So thanks for joining us. I'm Jen T with ARINGO. So just some quick housekeeping. You guys can definitely message me here on the comments. I'll try to answer them as we are live today. And then if anything kind of comes up, we can always chat offline as well. And I'll give you my contact information at the end. But beyond that, I'm here and excited to chat with you guys. Again, my name is Jen with ARINGO MBA Admissions Consulting, and we are going to jump right in to talking about how to hack the MBA application. All right, so the things that we're going to discuss is a little bit about the application itself, right? Like there's different caveats inside it. The exams that you're going to be taking, the GMAT, GRE, executive assessment, even the English proficiency exams, little caveats there. Then we're going to talk about, choosing which programs are going to be important for you, and then also how to network and to maximize everything that you have learned in this session and from any networking that you've had, and to make your dreams a reality by getting admitted to the top MBA programs. And then at the end, we'll also have some Q&A. And today is like a really special day because after our live session on YouTube, I will be in the GMAT Club chat, hosting the chat session in the chat as well. So if we don't get to chat here, we can chat later, offline, here, there, everywhere. Yay, get excited. And while we're here, so also just know that obviously this is social media and we'd love for you to like and share this, but also give us a thumbs up whenever we're talking about things that really are important to you and that you want to hear about or hear more about, okay? All right, so first thing when we talk about the MBA application is deadlines, right? So this is setting our whole timeline of what we're doing is, when am I going to be, starting my application to when am I finished? And so when we talk about deadlines, there are a few programs that have what's called early action. And I've named them here, but, Darden, Fuqua, Tuck, Georgetown, and Rotman are the main ones. Columbia used to do this. They're not doing it at this moment. They might bring it back, who knows. But essentially what happens is they say, we're going to give you the ability to submit your application early and get additional consideration for our program by submitting early. And so some schools like Darden, they have, which is like they have kind of like two different choices if you want to be binding or non-binding. So binding means if we review your application ahead of time, ahead of the deadline for the typical cycle, and we grant you admissions, that you are going to come here. You're going to pay your deposit. You're going to sign kind of like a letter of, pledging to Darden, drop your applications with all other schools, submit the deposit. We'll see you next fall. They can also have non-binding applications as well, which says that like Darden's in my top school list, but I'm not 100% if I'm going to commit if I get admitted, but like, they're my, they're at the top of my list, and there's a couple other schools I might be looking at. Some similar things with Fuqua. Tuck is a little bit different in the fact that they usually say if you submit your application by this date, which usually averages about to 23 days ahead of the regular deadline, then you could be guaranteed an interview. So, these are things, they're these little secrets that that aren't published anywhere for you to be able to find. So we're talking about them right now. And I'm probably doing some things that most people will be like, don't tell all of our secrets. But, here we are. So Georgetown, Rotman, similar kind of stories for them. We'll see if this changes as applications for the fall 26 start have not opened yet. They should open later this month. Columbia is usually the first school to drop an application because they actually have two applications in one. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so for right now, everything that we're talking about is based on past cycles. So just know that things might evolve, right? And always check for the true details once the application's open. So beyond that, let's talk about fee waivers. So applying to an MBA program is expensive. Not only do you have to take an exam that, could cost $200 to $300, but you also have to pay an application fee, which could be anywhere from, I think, like the lowest that I've heard is like, I think there might be like $60 or $75, but that's rare. More like $150 to $250 for each one of the schools. So if you can find waivers, this is absolutely the right place to be. So some schools will give you a waiver just for attending their events. And they'll say like, thanks for attending this event. At the end, we'll be providing you with a discount code so that you can get your application fee waived at the end. And so that's where, you want to make sure that you attend to the end, and then that you are, making sure you're using it when you go to check out, which who would forget about that? There's no common website or anything like that, so you can find the discount codes or anything. So, you do have to stay tuned and watch those. But I will say there's some other places. So GMAT Club hosts the MBA Spotlight twice a year. And so with that, there's one coming up in June, but usually a lot of the schools, ones that typically don't give waivers, also have waivers during that event. I know that I'm plugging GMAT Club again, but it's really important to know that like these are the people, the admissions committee is coming to GMAT Club and they're saying, hey, we want to talk to your students and we want to be our candidates and we want to be able to give them a little bit of an incentive to apply to our school after they've met us. And so they're giving that fee waiver. Next thing, as we start moving through, are letters of recommendation. So, there's obviously like the other components of an MBA application, essays, etc. But the letters of recommendation are like one of those things that's kind of out of your control, right? Like, you can kind of control how much you study for an exam or, perfecting your essays, but you can't control exactly what your recommender is going to say. So the best thing is to get them ready, prep them, have a meet with them, share with them your goals, or maybe even your past achievements, so they have a whole picture before they go to write the letter of recommendation. But one thing is that a lot of the schools actually take a common letter of recommendation that can be found on MBA.com, which is this same site that is administering the GMAT or GMAC, right? That's their graduate management admissions council. So they are part of this whole community and they offer a common letter, and schools can say, they can opt in and say like, I want to be part of this, and actually say like, okay, we can use this common letter and it can be submitted to all schools. And then some schools don't like that. They want their own personal letter. And so, there are a few schools that only require one letter of recommendation. And I know that there's people with certain situations where they might not have a second letter of recommendation. Maybe one of your past employers really wasn't a good goodbye. It was a sad bye. So you want to, like if you think, oh gosh, like I'm really kind of hurting in this area and I really can't dive deep into my community to find anybody else, let me consider potentially applying to schools that only require one letter of recommendation. Again, this is based on the past, but schools like MIT, Columbia, UQA, they are allowing you to only submit one letter of recommendation, which is maybe a little bit of a relief, right? And then my little side note and caveat or secret here is that I would also recommend setting a deadline for your recommender that is maybe 2 weeks ahead of the MBA application deadline, so that you can kind of keep them in check and make sure everything's submitted on time and your application is considered complete by deadline. Because if it's not submitted, then for the most part, unless it's like within 24 hours, typically it's not considered a complete application for that round, and then you'll get moved to the next round, which is just a bummer. And then we have this one exception to the rule is that USC Marshall requires 0 letters of recommendation. So very interesting, perspective of not requiring it. I think that admissions committees have different views on how much weight they put on a letter of recommendation. And so Marshall is saying, I think that we can, understand who you are and what you have to offer without the letter of recommendation. All right, so I'm going to be moving on to the next part, but I don't see any comments yet. You guys, you don't have any questions? Like, come on, ask questions as we go through, because, I'm here to help. So let's talk about the MBA exam. Obviously, this is a very complicated part of the process, and it's a lot of mental work for the exams. And so before you start your journey, or even if you're mid-journey and trying to determine what you're doing in deciding which exam you want to go with, you should know that the GMAT and the GRE, for the most part, are accepted equally across all MBA applications. MBA programs are not discerning about one or the other. They accept them both. The only time that there's a caveat for why you should take the GMAT over the GRE is if you're saying that you want to go into MBB consulting or you want to go into IB. Sometimes during the recruitment process for employment, they may ask for your GMAT. So this all kind of backpedals to later, back into the application process. The MBA admissions committee might say, so if they're telling me they want to go into MBB, but they don't know that they're going to have to do a GMAT or, submit a score, then, what is this really telling us? How much research have they done? And so I would, it doesn't mean that you can't take the GRE if you're going that direction. I'm just saying that it's one of those things that they may consider and say okay, how much research have you done? Not that you need to answer any questions about it in your application. If you decide to go the GRE route, just know that later on you might have to supply a GMAT score. And that's really not upon the admissions committee to decide if you should have taken it. So, up to you. The other thing I would say is that the GMAT and the GRE test differently. And so some people can perform well on the GRE and not so well on the GMAT. So if things aren't going well with the GMAT, maybe take a practice exam for the GRE. It's there's some people who really have come back to me and like, oh my goodness, Jen, this is what helped me actually just move forward with my applications and be able to submit and in the end get into top MBA programs. And we're like, why didn't anybody else tell me this? And it's well, it's got a little secret, right? So I would say you're still going to be continuing to enhance your study skills if you take a practice GRE exam or the vice versa, a GMAT score or GMAT exam. And it's not going to throw you off course. So don't feel like it's a waste of time, because it's still productive and it's just a different way of testing. And so see which one works best for you. Now, the EA, or the executive assessment. There are a few schools that are now taking the executive assessment as exam scores instead of the GMAT or GRE. The executive assessment is a shorter, condensed version of the GMAT that's tending to be, it was originally made for people that are applying to executive MBAs that need, they need to verify their quantitative skills and their readiness for the program. But they have been like 10 or 12 years away from education. So they are testing more of like your current business skills. And so while not originally developed for traditional full-time MBA applications, it is also used or accepted by them. So we're looking at Columbia, NYU, Tepper, Fuqua, Georgetown, UCLA, HEC, Pcoress. Like, it's really awesome that they have kind of an open mind to testing. And if you're really not doing well in the GMAT or GRE, the executive assessment and applying to these specific schools might be an answer. But also the caveat is if you decide to go the executive assessment route versus GMAT or GRE, just know that you could be limited to the schools that you can apply with because you only have that score. So you can't apply to Harvard, Stanford, etc. The other thing to talk about is waivers, right? So over the past 5 years, especially during COVID, schools started allowing candidates to have a waiver. So they either, one, submit some sort of documentation saying, I feel like I'm quantitatively ready for the MBA program, and you don't have to worry about, you don't need an exam score to really prove this because like on a day-to-day basis, I'm working quantitatively. That's really their most important focus is quantitative and analytical skills. English skills, yes, they're important. And they're going to want all that, but the verbal is less important. It's more the quantitative side that you need to, like, there's a burden of proof to say, I'm ready. You don't have to have a GMAT score to see my readiness. So some schools will say, submit the form, and if we agree that we think that you have what it takes quantitatively, analytically, etc., then we will consider your application. So go forward with the application with a granted waiver. Now, other schools might say, we want you to put the waiver request within your application, and we will consider it along with your other application materials. And you may or may not be admitted and you may or may not get the admissions waiver at time of application. So it kind of just depends. They also have some different deadlines when it comes to waivers, so pay attention to that. But there's some top schools on this list that have been historically doing GMAT GRE waivers. And so Tuck, NYU, Darden, Ross, Cornell, Tepper, McCombs, even MIT, and UCLA. So it's an option, especially if you feel like, man, the GMAT is just an obstacle I can't get through. Or I recently decided I want to do the MBA and I have no time to study for a GMAT or GRE exam, but I really feel confident in going into it. So waivers, great option. The other thing is, when we come to exams and international students, sometimes they're going to ask for English proficiency. Over the past couple of years, Duolingo has been more widely accepted across schools, including M7. So Wharton, Kellogg, Booth, Harvard, all accept Duolingo, or they did. You know, again, look at the caveats and the details at the application and within the application to make sure you meet them. But for the most part, Duolingo is a great option for a lot of the M7 schools. Again, same caveat as the executive assessment. If you take one exam, know that it might limit you from being able to take or to apply to some other schools. And then there's actually schools that simply don't require English proficiency. They feel like they can get it from your application, your interview, or they can get it from, they usually do like a Cura interview or something like that, where you have to answer questions verbally on the spot. And so MIT, Columbia, Yale, Fuqua, Oxford, RSM, IMD, so the European schools are also in this. And so definitely something to consider. Okay, so we got our first question. Natasha, thank you so much. How do you prove quant skills without GMAT, like through the essay and resume? So the way that we typically work with clients is having them kind of assess, what do you do day in, day out? What skills are you using? So like, let's say that you work in marketing, you're consistently looking at metrics and analyzing them to decide or to advise people on how to place ads. So, or, or whatever it might be. That's what you're going to talk to the admissions committee about, is that I'm on a daily basis, I'm working with a large data set, working to quantify things and to analyze them and deliver either a decision or to help advise others through dashboards, or even you can even talk about like presenting them to stakeholders or something like that. So that's an easier profession to talk about with quantitative skills. Obviously, if you're in finance, like that's easier. If you are more of in tech or product or some other thing, like some other fields where it feels a little bit less tangible, like sales, like we can talk about dashboards, numbers, etc., to kind of bring it all together. The other things that are going to help with this is also your academic performance during undergrad that can show that you've done well in these classes in the past. And so, those are other things that you can supplement for the committee to be able to say, yeah, we feel pretty confident that you'll be okay. And I'll just say that they're not willy-nilly giving away waivers. They're actually looking at historical data about people who have somewhat similar backgrounds and how they've performed in your, like in the cohort. So they have some historical data to decide if this is going to be a good idea or not to grant you a waiver. And that's why some of them have you submitted ahead of time, because they are, making sure that you can handle the load. All right. So moving on. For choosing MBA programs, there are some different options. And so I want to make sure that you have them. So typically an MBA program will start in the fall. That's what we all think of. A 2-year MBA program starts in the fall. You go through the fall quarters, the spring quarters, then you have an internship, and then you start your final year and graduate typically May, June, July, August, sometime like that. So that's our typical cycle of a full-time MBA program. But there are some programs called the J-term programs that start more historically in January, J-term. And so those programs, Columbia, Schulich, Ivy, INSEAD, HEC Paris, Rotterdam, for the most part, you're getting the same curriculum. Each school is a little bit different. So like for Columbia, if you start in the J term, you're actually going to plow through, you're going to do the spring quarter, plow through the summer and not have an internship and be able to complete the year with the students that actually started in the fall before you. Opposites with INSEAD, if you start in January, you actually get to add an internship period or a work period or something like that. Like you have a break in the summer where you get to add an internship if you feel like you need it and continue on in the program. So each school has their own caveats about what looks different for them. But just know that like if you're not ready to apply for the fall 26 start, or then you also have the option of the January. Conversely to that, they're actually taking applications right now for the January 26 start. So if you're like, in the end, like I would actually rather start sooner than later, then these J-term programs could be a great option for you, especially if you're like, check. I've got my GMAT. I know what I want to do. I have letters of recommendation already lined up and I like this school list. I can apply to these schools and be ready to go. So just have that in mind. The other programs that are a little bit different are the specialty programs like the tech MBAs. So Columbia, NYU, Cornell, Kellogg. Columbia started their master's in tech management, and then IE also has a tech MBA. And so these programs were something that was being asked for and demanded by employers that said, hey, we want more of your grads, but we want them to have a more tech-focused curriculum and we need them faster. So most of these programs are actually a year to year and a half instead of the traditional 2 years. Most of them don't have an internship because the employment rate is very close to, again, like before last year, I would say like 2 years ago, it was like 100%. So it's a little bit lower now because of all the tech bubble, blah, blah, blah. But with AI, I'm assuming that that will go back up. There's also conversely, not just tech, but there's also fintech. So if you're into the finance and technical side, payments, etc., this could be something that's a really great option for you. And because these are not their flagship 2-year MBA programs, they often also offer waivers for test scores. So something really exciting to kind of look into. The other option would be senior MBA programs. So let's say that you are more of a mid-career professional. So you have that higher, like 8, 9, 10 years of work experience. Not necessarily that you're ready for an executive MBA or that you want to do a part-time MBA. You want to do something full-time. These programs were developed just for you. And they actually have career-focused assistance that's for more of a mid-career professional versus somebody who's coming out of a full-time MBA. Even though you're going to be advanced in the full-time MBA, there's even higher outcomes as far as like senior levels that you might be able to achieve by going through these senior MBA programs. Stanford MSX is one of them. MIT and LBS both have Sloan Fellows programs, which again are very similar. MIT and LBS are more of like looking for like 12 to 16 years of work experience. So there's a little bit of a sliding scale there. Other than that, MSX, Foster, USC, IBEAR, more of like the 8 years of work experience or more. So that's definitely an option for you. All right, so we got some more questions, super exciting. Okay, so mixed trade. I'm graduating master's in econ this year, but I do not have work experience. What do you advise me to apply to an MS program or MBA? So you could apply to a deferred MBA. That's an offline conversation because those applications, they might be passed. But anyways, so if you're graduating with your master's in econ, you can decide, depending on what your career goal is, an MS program can be really fantastic because then you have this combination where you can immediately kind of go into the field and start working. If you really are more interested in an MBA where you come out at a high level manager role where you can work across different departments, then waiting for the MBA might be important, and getting 2 years of work experience underneath your belt before you apply would be important. So I would, like, unless you worked before your econ masters, I would say you'd have to wait for the MBA. If you immediately want to go into your next master's and be able to get at a higher level faster, then the MS programs are going to be better for you. Okay. Icon, does a good GMAT score increase the chances of receiving a scholarship or admission? So they can, right? So MBA admissions committees are looking for a balanced class. So, and they call it like they're curating a class, right? So they want people from different functions, sectors, backgrounds, and like international experiences. So they want people from everywhere. And when it comes to your GMAT score, they also need to protect their rankings. And for rankings, they do count on, GMAT scores and how high they are. They don't count on GRE scores, though. So that's why they have a little more leeway. But with the GMAT score, the higher it is, the more helpful you are for their rankings. You can also get scholarship through, like, being part of a global MNC. It could even be like entrepreneurship, being a woman. Like, there's a ton of different scholarship options. But I would say, like, if you have the right profile and you're a good fit for the program and you have a high GMAT score, then the chances are more likely that you would get admitted and get scholarship over somebody with a similar profile? That's a mixed answer. But in the end, it absolutely helps you to have a higher GMAT score and to be, more attractive to them. But like, let's say that mixed trade comes out of the econ master's program and applies with, oh my gosh, what is the new, like 805, right? Like if they were like the fancy person with the 805 that just recently was attained, then they might not still admit them because they don't have any work experience. So it's not the key to get into an MBA, but it definitely can be very helpful, if that makes sense. Okay, so Anushka, could you please provide some kind of insight or for the program called LGO and MIT? And I'm an engineer, so I have I'm very interested in doing the program. All right, awesome. So in specialty programs, I guess there should be another subset for dual degrees. So different MBA programs have several different dual degrees, MBA, JD, but some of them also have ones that are specialized to their specific schools. So MIT has one, LGO, that is a combination from the engineering school plus the MBA program, where you're getting a combination of classes between the two of them. And so if I don't get too technical, in the MBA program, you have your core curriculum, and then usually you take specialized classes to kind of have a more specific or targeted career outcome or career skills or function. And instead of taking those specialized classes for something that they typically offer, instead you would take them with engineering department and be able to take those to satisfy your dual degree while you're completing your MBA. So typically you could finish the 2 degrees in 2 years, or maybe you might have to do a third, depending on the program that you partner with. Wharton offers one that's called Wharton Lauder, and the Lauder program is actually focused on international experience. And so they have their own curriculum that you'll do in addition to the MBA. And again, use some of those credits to count towards the dual degree. Harvard has one, the Harvard Kennedy School. So those dual degrees are definitely a really great option and can be fantastic and help you in your admissions process. If it's something that you absolutely want and it aligns, then it helps make your candidacy even stronger. Another one of those programs is the Wharton Healthcare or HCM program. A lot of people ask me if I apply to this specialty program, does that give me higher chances of admission? It does if it aligns well with you. You just don't come out of the blue and, go from being a software engineer to say I want to go into healthcare management with no experience, and it kind of sets off a red flag in the admissions committee. And you have to go through a second interview, all this other stuff. And they're going to weed you out and say, you were just applying to HCM to try to get in through the back door, but it's really not an option like that. So I hope that covers LGO and things a little bit further, but we can dive deeper, Anushka, on MIT LGO offline as well. Pooja, can a career gap be offset by 6 or 7 months of an internship? So career gaps. So it depends, right? In the end, for the most part, the admissions committee is looking for the story. What happened to create the career gap? How did you deal with it or overcome it? If it was something that, needed to be handled or whatever, or even if it was an illness, right? Just saying, that, or if you were laid off and it took a while to find a job afterwards, which absolutely happened during COVID, post-COVID. It's happening now in the US with all the really fun things that are going on. So, if you have a gap, then they kind of want a little bit of an explanation. It doesn't have to be super detailed. You don't have to go into health details and that kind of stuff, but they want to know, hey, what happened during this gap? And then how how did you spend your time? So if you were like laid off, then they want to know, like, what did you do with your time besides obviously hunting for a job? Did you help consult with your friends on projects? Did you collaborate? Did you volunteer? Like, what did you do to fill your time instead of just playing video games, which is like this archaic thought that I would say, like, if there's still some older faculty involved in an admissions committee decisions is what they would assume. So you just don't want them to assume anything about your profile. And that's where you're filling in the gaps for them in your application. So would an internship offset this? It depends. Is that during your career gap? Then yeah, absolutely. Like, you were working. You might not have been getting paid, but you are doing something progressing, hopefully that's tied to your goal and the story that you're sharing with the admissions committee. All right, Natasha, my reason and goal for the MBA is job prospects. How do you check what schools are good for what industries, roles, and how do I be smart about picking the schools? Okay, so number one, ARINGO, MBA admissions consulting firm at ARINGO.com. We have an MBA tab. And so if you click on it, it will actually have MBAs by specialty. And so you can click on that and get the breakdown of which schools are really good for different or most commonly sought after for different professions. So if you want to do sports and media entertainment, it's going to have Columbia, NYU, USC, and UCLA, right? Like, those are going to be the big ones. But I mean, they're also going to be at the other schools as well, right? But they're going to give you kind of an idea and some direction. If you're not sure for right now, I actually use the UCLA's Anderson has like a career page of like career tracks, and you can actually go into their website and click on the different specializations that they offer and see what roles people are usually getting and what their typical work looks like and the companies that they would work for. So, it's a really amazing tool that I hope that they never get rid of, but it's something where you can do some research. And so, that's an easy way to start with it. If you have more in-depth questions, somebody like me, an MBA admissions consultant, can also help you. Okay, Kojo, you asked about what age is too old for an MBA. I'll be 34 by summer 2026, and I'm looking to apply in round 1 of the next application cycle. GRE of a 333, 5 years of work experience, and from Ghana. Okay, so there's a bit of a gap. If I'm kind of reading things correctly, 5 years of work experience means that maybe you started to work at 28. So they do know that in some countries there's either a year required of service, which I think some countries within Africa do, and I'm not 100% about Ghana, but I know that they know that, like, sometimes there's some sort of mandate that you have to do a year of service after you graduate. So if that's one of those gaps, then we address it. Some countries require that you be part of the military. So schools are cognizant of that and will help with skewing it'll be factored in to your profile, right? Like, if something like that is going on. If there was a bigger gap for something, they'll really want to know, because 5 years of work experience actually is right on target for, a traditional 2-year MBA program. They're just going to want to know what happened. And some schools are a little bit more protective of the average age that is advertised. And so kind of in the M7, they're a little bit more protective, although they're ranked on years of work experience. So how many years of work experience their candidates have. So again, 5 years, you could be the exception to the rule as to what they normally accept. It just depends. There's a lot to unpack there. And again, happy to do that offline. But if you were 34 and you don't have 5 years of work experience, you have more of like 6, 8, 9, 10 years of work experience, then that's the other side of the coin, where it might be that you should be looking at the senior MBA programs. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next slide about networking, but I had one more question come in. Can ARINGO help secure scholarships for NUS Singapore, say with an excellent GMAT of up to a 705, 2 years of work experience, NGO, etc. I would say that ARINGO can help with scholarships as far as getting them upon admission and after with negotiations, as well as applying to specific ones. I would assume that, your profile seems to be above average for NUS. So hopefully, yes. But again, like, I can't guarantee anything off of just a few sentences. So, let's talk offline about that a little bit more. But yes, we do help with scholarship. Okay, networking hacks. So this is the other side that I am really big on, is doing your networking and your research on a school will pay dividends, because the school wants to know that they're your number one choice. How do you know that they're your number one choice if you've never been to campus? If you just started your MBA search process 2 months ago and there's so many schools, how do you know that they are the one? Well, the way that you do this research is not only by looking at their curriculum and, knowing what the setup of their program is, but then also talking to current students to see if it's the right fit for you. So I would say speak to current students and track your conversations, because later on you're going to want to be able to utilize them in your application. And you want to find people with similar backgrounds. So like maybe somebody who is engineering that wants to move into the product space, and you can see that, from their profiles online. Either through the school. So a lot of the times they'll have some spotlight of different students. You could look on LinkedIn for current students, or if you're really smart, you can go to specific clubs that will make sense for you, and you can easily find them and do a targeted search. So there's always going to be a product management club. There's going to be a consulting club, a finance club, an entrepreneurship club, and then 1,000 more. No, not really 1,000, but maybe 20 plus for sure, if not more, that you can look at and decide if you want to reach out to students from those groups and say like, hey, I see that you made a similar journey. I'm really interested in this. Or I see that you're also from my home country or town or state, whatever it might be. And I am interested in this MBA program. I would love to connect with you and find out how they've helped you get to this next level. So it's not just saying like, hey, I'd like to talk to you. It's I'd like to talk to you about, and you want to be able to illustrate that you wanted to have like a pointed conversation, essentially, that you can use in your essays later on in your application and say, hey, I spoke with so-and-so and they talked about this track or process or activity or club and how that really helped them with finding an internship, finding a job, etc. And this is something that I feel like would be a great fit for me. So that's what we're doing. So you can look out, you can look at the student clubs organizations, you can look on LinkedIn, but then also, again, I would track those conversations, because certain schools, like Columbia, when you submit your application, INSEAD, I believe, is the other one, that they ask you who you spoke with or what events you've attended, and you do not want to leave that blank. That's a number one moment where they're like, if you didn't attend any of our events, how do you know that we're your number one choice? And so you want to attend those events. But then also you can say, I spoke with so-and-so, class of 25, class of 26, class of 75, whatever it might be. You want to be able to list that. But the other part is some schools, if you build a strong enough bond with a current student, then they allow endorsements. And so Booth, Kellogg, Fuqua, Yale, and Cornell are the ones I know of specifically. And this actually comes in handy. I had, like, building these strong relationships, I had a client that applied for a GMAT waiver for Cornell, and she was waitlisted. And because of the relationships that she had with several of the students she built over the past year of researching the school and having these conversations, I think that there were like 4 or 5 phenomenal endorsements that were set and really pushed the admissions committee over the edge. And each one of those said, like, this person is an absolute fit for our program. They're a right fit for our community. I could see them doing this, this, and this. And it really helped push over the edge so that it moved from waitlist to admitted. The other thing that you can also look at are diversity and affinity groups. MBA.com has like a full list of them and some more details and links, which I really can't do in a presentation, but there is one for LGBTQ called Reaching Out, and it's Reaching Out MBA. RUMBA is their acronym. And so they're amazing. They're really helpful with candidates who have, LGBTQ identity. And I would say like really getting the litmus test of the schools and the atmosphere and making sure that somebody feels comfortable with going to the MBA program. And then also the opportunities that that school has given them. And they also have a fellowship. So if it's something that ends up resonating really well with you, there's a potential that you could receive scholarship or fellowship related to RUMBA. Women in Business, so there's the Forte Foundation, the Laidlaw Women in Business program as well. Forte is actually global. There are programs all over the globe that are participating in Forte. They specifically, if you do their MBA launch program, they have the ability to have waivers for the application fees. So that's really exciting, and I'm happy to talk more about that. For Laidlaw, they're actually for the European schools, which is really exciting because it's just another layer of ability to not only gain something in your specific passion, but then also to have that additional support in being part of a thriving community, business community that's helping promote women throughout. So then there's these other clubs that help with promoting inclusion and diversity. So these are more domestic, like for U.S. candidates that are the Consortium, National Black, Prosperinca, the TIGO. Those organizations help with the application process and potentially also have the ability for either potential scholarships later on or fellowships, and more importantly, networking, right? And so you can also bring this in to your application and say, in networking with so-and-so from the National Black Association, I learned about this. And that happens with anything, right? Like anything that I'm telling you here, you want to fold that into your application to show this research. The other thing is if you're deciding that you want to go the PhD route. So some MBA folks decided they want to go the PhD route. And so there's actually a pipeline for funding for them as well. All right. So now let's talk about this. We've had a lot of conversations about different things today. And the important part is to, like I've said several times, do your research. Find out about the school, their curriculum, what's special about them. Is it a MAP program at Ross? Is it the Chicago booth has like a program where essentially you're required to take one class and then all other classes or pick your own adventure. But they have like the booth case method. HBS has a case method. Each one of these schools have their own characteristics, the way that they teach, the things that they provide, the treks that they provide for specializations, those types of things. You want to be able to put that into your application so that they can see you've done the research. Then you want to strategize when you want to use that information. So again, like if you decided to be part of the Forte Foundation as a woman, female from anywhere, it's global. So if you're a female applying to an MBA, even putting on your like clubs and activities that you're a part of Forte, even just as a member, that's a nod to the Forte Fellowship. And then later on, maybe when they admit you and they look at your profile, they're like, oh, like if we're going to give anybody a Forte scholarship, it might as well be somebody who's a member of Forte. So you're giving them these simple nods to, I'm connected. I know how I can fit in. And, again, like that's being able to show this on your resume, not just from what you've done with your job, but then also what you've done extracurricularly. Schools love to see what you've done outside of the classroom, and outside of your job. So if you did, activities during college, they want to see those. If you, and this is really important, they do want you to have like some sort of extracurricular. It can even be a hobby, like that you do marathon running. Like that gives them some perspective of who you are, what kind of goals you've had to set, etc. But talk about those clubs, that leadership, anything that you have to share with the admissions committee. You want to figure out how to best put it into your application. That's where ARINGO, we really excel at helping you with. And then execute. Come up with your deadlines, right? Like, so obviously the schools are going to have their own deadlines, but you want to work ahead of that schedule so that you can accommodate for any issues that might come up. So decide on your plan, decide on, okay, I'm applying to early decision for these schools. I'm applying to round 1 for these schools, and I'm applying to, to none in round 3 or round 2, but I'm open if I need to. These are some backup plans. So execute, just do it. Don't let yourself go into like a moment of being, where you're questioning whether this is the right thing. There's a lot of room for doubt in this process. It's a lot for you as you go through it, but having somebody help you, whether that's a friend, somebody who's an alumni, been through the MBA application process, or an admissions consultant, you want to have somebody there that's going to help you through the process and also hold you accountable for making sure you're getting everything done. All right. So as I mentioned, I'm with ARINGO MBA Admissions. I'm Jen, I'm the CEO, and I'm here to help. We help clients on a daily basis, year in, year out. Our founder was an Wharton alum, so we take a team-based approach to how we work with our clients, but we can do everything from coming up with a strategy for your application, working one-on-one consultants that have been in the industry for 6, 10, 12, 15 years, 20 years for some. And then we also help with, we help you write your application. You write it, not us. And then we help you with your CV, interview prep, anything that's part of the application process. So that's my one salesy slide. But other than that, now we're ready for questions. So yeah, any questions that you guys have about any of this, please feel free to add them to the comment section. Beyond that, I am going to take a sip of water, but you have my contact information here. And you can also set up a time for us to meet and go over your profile from the link within this. I'll also add the link to the YouTube presentation once it's posted GMAT's YouTube. I'm talking a lot, which means that you're not typing a lot. So ask your questions here. I believe that the actual chat session on GMAT Club's GMAT chat link was posted here for later on. We're going to go in the forum and kind of do live profile evaluations. So feel free to do that. All right. Any questions? I'm not seeing any. One question that I typically get asked, and I know that like I just came up with a plan to execute with, it sounded like a lot of schools. So a lot of people ask, like, how many schools do people typically apply to? And I would say about 5 to 7, right? Like that's usually the plan, is I got about 5 to 7 and I'm going to focus on them. Now you can add or detract depending on one thing or another. You can spread those out over multiple rounds. But that's really up to you, how far you are in the process and, how much work you can handle while working at the same time. I've had people ask if they should, maybe take a work break during this application process to do the GMAT and to write applications. And my answer right off the bat is no, do not, because you're going to be compared to other people who are working full-time jobs, doing extracurriculars, and doing this application process. So if you decide to take a work break, and we need to address it in your application, you're adding your own speed bump. I would not do it unless you had to do it. That's happened before, right? Like some people have intensive jobs that are, 80, 90 plus hours a week, and they don't know how they're going to be able to finally take the exam. So that's, something to, to just know that I wouldn't encourage people to step away from their work to be able to do the MBA application. Helga has a question. Do you think candidates with well-known companies applying like EY, Bain have an edge over startups and well-known unknown names? So no, yes, no, right? So I think that the advantage of those names are, number one, they're big companies and they're desirable to have on their statistics, right? Like we have X number of people that came from Bain to our MBA program. And then likely if you're working at Bain, you will do well with a career, like getting hired afterwards, because it's a sought after career path for people to move into something else post MBA, and you'll get hired, right? So there's some ideas there, but that does not change the weight that you could bring in your application for your unknown company. And it's up to you to deliver the burden of proof, right? Like that I've been working substantially at a company that's been doing X, Y, and Z. And in fact, I've been involved heavily in developing the entire XYZ program for them. And so you have more hands-on experience than somebody from Bain, because they're proposing ideas to companies where you're deciding on them and implementing them. So it's up to you to share what the company does and what you do for them to show what you've accomplished and the impact you've had. So I would say that, yeah, there's going to always be a handful of consultants, a hefty handful of consultants that are going to get admitted to MBA programs. It's normal. It's standard, because typically they actually go back and work for the MBA or for the MBB firms. And it's usually a sponsored candidate, so automatic employment. There's a lot of benefits there for an MBA admissions committee to accept them. But that is not all that they're looking for. They want the people who have worked for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, for people in startups, because you have invaluable experience that other people aren't going to have and be able to bring to the classroom. So yes, you can have a ton of impact with a small company, and it doesn't have to be an MNC or an MBB. Okay, so Helga, follow up. Any strategy you recommend to guys who work in heavy hours industry like consulting IB for GMAT? I would definitely, maybe if you know yourself, invest in a tutor. It's almost like fitness. Like if you know how to work out, but you aren't committed to actually going to the gym, usually you'll get a trainer, which will make you go to the gym and hold you accountable. So that's where actually having somebody there to keep you accountable can be helpful. Padma, last question of the day, because we're about time's up. What schools should someone with 10 plus years of work experience target, and how can he or she get through the AdCom interviews despite applying as an older candidate? So again, not all schools are 100% biased to candidates with more years of work experience. It's really in being able to tell them why you need to be in a 2-year MBA program. So if it's a career pivot, fantastic. Talk about that and how and where you're going. If your end goal is to go to consulting or IB, it's not that likely. So you need to come up with a very plausible employment plan afterwards for them to be open to somebody with 10 plus years of work experience. MBBs, IB, they're not going to hire somebody who's over 30. And this sounds harsh, but it's, a generalization. For the most part, they don't. There can be exceptions to the rule all the time, but for the most part, because people over 30 are typically looking to start a family, slow down, and not necessarily amp up and travel and go everywhere or work 80, 90 hours a week as much as somebody who's maybe 28, 29, 30 at the time of hire. Okay. I know I said Helga was the last one. Padma, you asked me that. Helga asked. Okay. And then one last one. Keenan, any suggestions on how to start preparation for the GMAT from zero? I would talk to people in the GMAT forum for some of this advice. Now, I will tell you that all day long, you'll see that you have to have such a high GMAT score to get into an MBA program. Grain of salt, that is not true. But you can definitely get help with testing skills. It's the MBA advice that I would steer away from just a little bit until you get your GMAT done and then being able to make your plan. There's plenty of GMAT prep companies that work with GMAT Club that have discounts and can be really helpful. I will say there's a lot of resources on the GMAT Club YouTube channel as well, as far as like free advice and tips and tricks and things like that. So that could be a good place to start. I'm not a GMAT expert, and I don't want to pretend that I am. So what do you suggest for candidates over 40? Well, senior MBA programs are definitely an option for you. Executive MBA programs are also an option for you. And again, we can talk about that offline. But there are some full-time options, and there are lots of part-time options for candidates over 40. All right, so it is time to end the chat for today. It has been amazing working with or talking to all of you today, and I hope to talk to you later. Join me on the GMAT Club chat this afternoon in a couple hours, or an hour, I think. But join me there, or email me, or set up a time to chat via the profile evaluation link. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.